Welcome to MuggleCast, your weekly ride into the Wizarding World fandom. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Micah.
Get ready to be mollycoddled, because this week we're talking about how much info Harry needs to know and why the adults fuss over letting him have it. It's time for Chapter 5 of Order of the Phoenix, called, easily enough, Order of the Phoenix. And joining us this week is friend of the show, fellow Hypable podcaster, Pam. Welcome back, Pam.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Of course. You co-host Millennial with Laura and I. You co-host What the Hype
Wrong show.
Pam's putting in all the podcasting work this week, so we appreciate it while Laura takes a week off.
I'm playing bingo with our whole little podcast family.
Listeners, before we jump into chapter by chapter, reminder that last week we launched our brand new MuggleCast merch store, available at MuggleCastmerch.com. This is where you can grab brand new original MuggleCast shirts, hats, hoodies, and more. For example, we have Security Nightmare gear. We have a choo-choo hats and shirts. We have a We Criticize Because We Care t-shirt, which I'm a big fan of. We even have a Pickle Pack t-shirt. So there's lots of great options at MuggleCastmerch.com, and this is an excellent place to support us if you don't already support us on Patreon or Apple Podcasts. Though I will say, patrons are getting an additional merchandise discount that they can use at checkout at MuggleCastmerch.com. So once again, check out MuggleCastmerch.com and pick something up.
And one other announcement, 'tis the season for MuggleCast Secret Santa. This is something that has been long running for the show, particularly on our patrons Facebook group, which you get by being a part of the Patreon community. And many thanks to Brittany B, who all these years has been running it. You guys participating this year, do you think?
I think so. I need to get on the list.
Yeah.
I've gotten some great gifts. The sign up deadline is December 2nd. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to message us. But that's just a courtesy announcement to let you know.
Actually got these very cool Ravenclaw coasters.
I
from
like that.
One of our Secret Santas.
Cute.
There's more than one. There's 4 of them. So it's not just like they
Just one
pulled it
coaster.
off of a local diner and sent it along. But it's something that I really enjoy doing every year. So I'm glad that it's back. And thanks to Brittany for pulling it all together again.
Yeah. And full instructions, because we do it through Elfster and all that, can be found on a pinned post in the Facebook group.
You never know when I'm going to pull off the shelf.
You got a lot on those shelves.
I don't ever know.
Well, speaking of Patreon, this week on Bonus MuggleCast, we will celebrate Halloween by coming up with our own potions that we think would solve a specific problem. So we came up with some concoctions. We came up with names for these. At least I came up with a name for mine.
Yes. I was pressured to also come up with a name when I saw that you did. And Pam had one in there. So.
Well, only because Andrew put one in. I was like, oh, is that what
I
we're
know.
doing?
Wow, I am such an influencer.
Monkey see, monkey do over
I
here.
We all contributed.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to have a fun bonus MuggleCast this week, again, over on Patreon and also through Apple Podcasts. We release 2 bonus MuggleCast installments every month. So without further ado, time for Chapter by Chapter, Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 5, The Order of the Phoenix.
We last spoke about this chapter on episodes 230, titled Trendsetter, for June 4th, 2011, and episode 437, The Voldeport, on which I thought I had an idea what that would be, and it's not what I thought that it was, interestingly enough, the meaning of Voldeport. Anyway, that one was from October 7th, 2019. Let's roll the time turner clip.
Pam, get ready for this production value.
Ooh.
I'm so excited.
3 turns should do it, I think. Good luck.
What the? Episode 230.
Yeah,
because we're getting in deeper into the story here. Things are getting a lot darker, so it's like you kind of expect that we're going to see some very dark, powerful magic going down in this book.
Yeah, and you think weapon, you think like
a death stick.
Yeah, I don't know,
like a sword.
Yeah, something like that. Something that if he physically had it, could do serious damage to other people. But it's just a prophecy.
Right. It is a bit misleading.
Episode 437.
I don't think Sirius really has had the opportunity to mature because he was locked up in Azkaban for 13 years, and he's very much been a prisoner despite the fact that he's not in jail. If we think about everything that he's been through since a prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, he spent a year just living with Buckbeak. Like, you can't talk to Buck. Oh, I mean, you can, but it's not going to talk back.
Mysterious thing, time.
That was you, Andrew?
Is it?
That was me making the noise, but Pat was on there too. I did not realize he was on that long ago.
I was going to say June 4th, 2011, the allergies were definitely kicking in for you and me, Andrew.
We all have that problem going back 10 or more years. Yeah, we all had allergies.
I think it was a nasally voice. We were just trying to be a little more radially back in the day. Becomes a little more natural now.
It's why these look backs are so fun.
Well, to kick things off, I just want to set the scene by observing how the scene is described, because I think it says a lot about this chapter and the Order of the Phoenix. So the kitchen is in the basement, and there is this haze of pipe smoke hanging in the air like battle fumes. And I love the symbolism here, because the kitchen, which is normally the gathering spot for families, or in this case, the Order, it's underground, it's hidden, which I think is emblematic of this like hidden operation going on right now. And the battle fumes add to the vibes that this is a war crew. It feels like Harry just entered the war room, the situation room.
Yeah, the whole bunker or the whole underground thing reminds me of a bunker. And not only is this wartime, you're right to point out, but there's going to be a war fought over Harry in this chapter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the idea of battle fumes is like almost like a premonition of what's to come. So it kind of also gives you the sense that they've probably been arguing down there for a while because everybody's stuck living under the same roof too. Yeah. This is definitely not the first time that they've butted heads.
And you could blame Mundungus for the battle that's about to come, because if he didn't disapparate, maybe things wouldn't have gotten so out of hand.
Right. Harry would still be on Privet Drive, very, very upset with everyone for not telling him what's going on.
The Battle of Molly versus Sirius.
Let's get into it. So in the left corner,
we need I forget his name, but the boxing announcer.
Don
Vince
King
McMahon
or something.
No, not Vince McMahon.
Did I say something wrong? Well, let's get
He's been canceled, hasn't he?
That's not Vince McMahon?
No, it's not Vince McMahon.
Oh, damn. I don't know anything about boxing. Okay, in the first corner, we have Sirius, Harry's godfather, who in this chapter, more than any other chapter before, is doing godfatherly things. Like telling Harry that he didn't have it so bad on Privet Drive. It's kind of funny after another chapter of Harry's shouting to have him be reintroduced to Sirius, and Sirius is like, yeah, you didn't have it that bad. I have it worse than you. And the fact that Harry doesn't also flip out with this information, like I'm pretty sure Sirius is the only one alive who could survive saying such a thing to Harry right now in the middle of all of his rage.
I think he was taken off guard by it.
Yeah.
And
like, he can't
Harry's
be angry.
Also, he's had a little time to process. He's gotten a little bit of that emotion out of him, but I do think Sirius's comment took him a little bit by surprise.
Yeah, agreed with that. But Sirius, of course, is referencing his own isolation. And it's funny to see them kind of go back and forth. Harry's like, well, at least you knew what's going on. And, Sirius is actually, when I say he's doing godfatherly things, I think he intuits, both in general and directly from what Harry says, at least you know what's going on, that Harry has wanted to know and probably been desperate for more information. And so the crux of this chapter is Sirius loudly saying, well, honestly, Harry, I'm surprised you haven't been pressing us for more information on Voldemort. And it lights the fire that, the battle smoke comes. So I feel like this is a great assist. I feel like, all the ways in which Sirius goes to bat during the argument with Molly is great. But just in general, having that conversation happen here, most people would prefer that it didn't occur at all. And that's just not, I think, reasonable. So Sirius has his back.
He does. And I like the word that you used, the assist. He gets Harry's situation better than most. And I think he uses this moment to refocus him on what's important. And that's getting more information about what's happening with Voldemort. And I just think Sirius, though, given how glum things are at Grimmauld Place, he figures, hey, could use a bit of drama around here. Let me stir the pot a little bit. Let me be a little bit like my good friend Albus and get the drama going.
That is the impression I got as well. Molly's ready to get the kids up to bed, and he's like, I want a little primetime entertainment before everybody goes to bed for the night. But I do also understand, I think you're kind of joking, Micah, but I also wouldn't put that past Sirius. The idea of shaking up his lonely, isolated days here at Grimmauld Place with a little bit of excitement. And he wants his godson to know what's been going on. Mm-hmm. And he knows his godson deserves to know.
Yeah, for sure. Do we think that Sirius actually understands Harry's situation better than Molly does? Just the whole being excluded thing?
I think so, because Sirius was isolated for a long time. And I know that, we all know that they've been in correspondence and that Harry was genuinely excited to go live with him, after the events of Prisoner of Azkaban. That's obviously before Wormtail escapes and all of that happens. But yeah, I just, I don't know if the Weasleys, barring Ron and maybe Fred and George, because they see the bars on his window when they go and rescue him, right? Know really how bad he has it at the Dursleys. He's severely being abused there. Maybe not fully physically, but it takes a toll on you to live in a house where people just think you're a terrible human.
Yeah. Going off of what you said, Pam, and then also looking back to what we were discussing on episode 437, Sirius has been a prisoner ever since he committed the crime against Pettigrew. It's not changed. Just the definition of prisoner has changed for him, right? He's been in Azkaban for a period of time, but once he's out, he's really still a prisoner of circumstance. He never really gets to be free.
Right.
And this is his one opportunity because it's his home. So in a way, it's a bit of my house, my rules. And I think that's what's going on here at the start. He wants to feel some level of control.
Yeah.
And I think you could say, honestly, the same for Molly, but she's coming at it from a different perspective, right? I think that she is coming at it from wanting to keep her family safe. And there's so much that she cannot control with regards to that. And so they're both lashing out for the same reason, but the catalyst for both of them is completely different.
Yeah, Molly's always been sort of the pillar of her family, the heart of her family, and I really doubt she's felt isolated in many, 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 many years.
Yeah. Well, you just think about the clock she has in her kitchen and why that exists and maybe how many spoons.
Sirius's clock would be, Sirius's clock would, for all the years he was in Azkaban, just be like the shadows he made friends with on the wall.
Right, exactly.
And she's also obeying Dumbledore's orders. Dumbledore had asked that they not share a lot of info or any info with Harry, and she brings that up in this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so in the other corner, and by the way, it's Michael Buffer, not Vince McMahon. In the other corner, Molly, somebody else's mother, does someone else's mother things, is what I titled this, because she is so extra in this chapter. It's not just when she gets into it with Sirius. Long-term listeners of the show will know that I have problems when anybody attacks my boy. But even before then, she's interrupting people. She is really just trying to take control of everything. Kind of what you were saying, Pam, like she wants to exert this level of control because she probably feels as powerless as some of the others do. But there's a moment that I forgot happens in this chapter, which is that Mundungus Fletcher opens his mouth to actually apologize to Harry for ditching him. And I couldn't believe, as I was rereading this, that it was about to happen. Dung is like, I believe I owe you an apology. And he's about to actually apologize. But then Molly from across the room is like, Mundungus Fletcher, I told you not to smoke that pipe in here. And so what could have been a really like redemptive moment for Dung is interrupted. And then it's over. I'm like,
but in hindsight, we also know he ends up being a terrible person. So I don't think I want that redemptive moment from him. It's also his fault for smoking in the house when Molly has already asked him not to.
Listen.
Now, that said, I will play devil's advocate with Dung. If you're in the Order of the Phoenix, are you being paid for this role? He needs to make a little bit of money. They all need to make some money. I don't think it's fair. They should be working in the Order for free. So
it's volunteer basis.
I don't like that. That's not right.
He can't go outside and smoke. It's too risky.
He needs one of those like nicotine patches, I guess. So
he needs a smoker's corner. They need to build in an unplottable.
There's not a spell or a potion to help people who have the urge to smoke in the Wizarding world.
Adds to his character.
Yeah, I agree.
It does.
It's his character thing. I mean, honestly, if 12 Grimmauld Place smells like an old school bowling alley used to smell with all that cigarette, like secondhand cigarettes, but yeah, well, maybe not a casino, but bowling alley is what I think of. You know that smell. I would stay in Grimmauld Place for like a summer if it smelled like that, because that was a good smell. It's probably really bad for you. But I mean, Dung's whole thing adds character. I think he's okay for now for 2 more books. It's nice that he recognizes that he did a bad thing. See, if Mrs. Fig were here, she'd be forcing Dung to apologize. Nobody's here doing that. And still, like, he looks at Harry and he's like, I guess I owe you an apology. And then he says, I had a business deal. And yeah, if they're not getting paid, Andrew, you know, duty calls, business calls, the money, you can't line the inside of your wallet with hopes and dreams.
Right.
So she's also, I guess, over controlling. Like, I can understand there's this whole thing about dinner and people offer to help, and she's kind of overboard on like, Tonks, don't help, you'll only make things worse. And I just think that that's not very polite.
No,
she's like trying to be nice, but also like, Tonks, don't get anywhere near this food I'm making because you'll ruin it.
She had also just asked for some help from anybody, I think. And then Tonks tries to help. I mean, this is just erratic behavior. Just ask somebody specific to help you if you don't want somebody in the room to offer to help you.
She's stressed. Some of her behavior isn't defensible, but it's understandable. And I'm thinking back to last episode, we talked a little bit about how she lost both of her brothers in the First Wizarding War. Now she has Charlie, Bill, and Arthur all in the Order. Arthur is in the crosshairs of the Ministry. Percy is at odds with the family. Fred and George are a handful at the best of times. And Harry has just gone through this attack by Dementors. So throw that all together with the fact that she seems to be the caretaker now of Grimmauld Place. And I think that any one of those things is enough to be stressed about.
I mean, who asked her to become the caretaker of Grimmauld Place? I mean, well, though, maybe that's the point. Maybe it's like
maybe she
unconscious emotional labor. But it's somebody else's house. It's Sirius's house. And
do you want Sirius to cook? I don't.
But that's all she knows how to do. You know, she's a homemaker until like, you know, they give her like the warrior moment, right, in Deathly Hallows. But up until then, we know that she's a homemaker. And so I think she just tries to slip into that role for some semblance of normalcy. And, you know, maybe she should have asked, because you also can't like smother or mother adults, right? Like, that's ridiculous, especially like adults that are not your children.
And
so
Yeah, and I love this point Zafira is bringing up in our Discord right now. Remember how cray we all went in lockdowns? Here's something that happens since the last time we discussed this chapter. We've all experienced what lockdowns are like. They are in a lockdown effectively. So of course, some of the people are going to be going crazy and there's going to be some fights.
And the emotional effect that you were talking about, Andrew, we see it come to a head with what happens when she confronts the boggart in the wardrobe, and it's constantly turning into different members of her family. And then Harry, she's just very overwhelmed in this moment. And I think she unfairly takes it out on Sirius.
Well, thank you for saying. Yeah, I mean, look, it's clear that she's overwhelmed, and everybody gets overwhelmed sometimes. You know, what's interesting to me is that the argument that develops is all about what Dumbledore has said probably a little bit ago, which was that don't tell Harry any more than he needs to know. And I think it's Dung who argues or maybe Lupin, circumstances have changed since then. So there was this old edict from Dumbledore saying, don't tell Harry more than he needs to know. But none of these adults can get on the same page as one another on what that means, what that entails. And it ends up being, leading to this big argument.
Does seem strange, though, that there was no prep. They knew Harry eventually was going to be coming to Grimmauld Place. Why did they not discuss this? Why were they not ready to present some kind of information to him? It just seems like...
That has to be on Dumbledore, though, because the only argument anybody can give is that Dumbledore said need to know. But if he doesn't clarify need to know, then that's why all the other adults are at odds over what they should and shouldn't say. And it's probably because Dumbledore himself doesn't know at that point. He's kind of like still a little scared about like how deep this connection goes with Harry. And he can't tell anybody that because he's keeping all his cards close to the chest. So
what's that, Pam? Insufficient orders from Dumbledore?
Sure. Is there a button for that?
The disorder of the Phoenix.
Disorder of the Phoenix.
Disorder of the Phoenix. Disorder of the Phoenix.
Episode title.
There it is.
You're welcome.
Oh my God. So let's get into this. And I've prepared something of a blow by blow because I do find it interesting. Some people might think I'm coming for Molly. I'm not coming for Molly, but each sort of character has different feelings about different aspects of the whole thing. Harry's need to know his danger level, whether or not he should be considered of age or responsible enough to know what Voldemort's doing. I think the whole thing's offensive to even ask whether he needs to know anything about Voldemort, but we know there is a very good reason ultimately to keep Harry at least somewhat in the dark, in that it protects the plans that the Order have to defeat Voldemort. So with that in mind, let's kind of talk this through. So Molly first says that Ron and Hermione are too young for this information and to be in the Order of the Phoenix. Sirius is the one who says they have to actually be in the Order. Harry has a right to know. So Sirius again with the assist on Harry. But then Fred and George, who nobody asked, say, wait a minute, why can Harry be told stuff, but we can't because we're of age? And for me, I'm thinking this could have gone so well for Harry. Fred and George probably would have found out eventually, but now they want to throw their hat in because they've been kept out of the loop as well.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where they're coming from. Harry is younger than them. Fred and George are adults. They deserve to know this information, especially when Ron and Hermione are going to be hearing this information too.
Do you think that the fact that Harry will tell Ron and Hermione, and he admits as such, means that anyone older than Ron and Hermione should also be told?
Since they are in the house, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? Fred and George are going to find their own way to get this information out of the trio if they're not sitting there.
There's a certain amount of trust that's been extended to them all. They are inside the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix.
And that's what we spoke about last week, I think, on the show. By being within this house, there's a trust among this whole group.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. And, all Sirius can say, he's not going to engage with the whole of age, not of age thing. This is up to your parents, ultimately. But as for Harry, and this is when Molly goes off the deep end, she says, it's not down to you to decide what's good for Harry. Her normally kindly face looked dangerous. She says, she leans on Dumbledore. She says, remember what Dumbledore said, don't tell him any more than he needs to know.
So this is where I start to side a bit with Sirius, in that Sirius is Harry's guardian. And I think for Molly and for us as readers, we forget that there was a full year where Sirius got to be a godfather to Harry when James and Lily were still alive. And he is definitely immature at times, but he's still a good human being. And the shots that she takes at Sirius, I'm trying to think who I could possibly compare it to, but it's not somebody that we would normally associate with Molly's character.
It's an interesting dichotomy, because it's the woman who was taking care of Harry over the last 4 years in certain ways, looking out for him, versus, to your point, Micah, the guy who was his godfather, IRL, saw him in person for a full year before James and Lily died. So it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, there's evidence that Sirius cares for Harry and is a good godfather.
Yeah.
I mean, he gives him the firebolt, and he gives him all that advice in the last year.
I trust him. Is it partly his tone, maybe, bringing this up right before Molly's trying to send them up to bed? Could Sirius and Molly have hashed this out in advance of Harry getting back,
That's exactly it. They're cooped up together. That business associates. They're in this underground, smoke-filled den of depravity and dung, and they just, haven't. Yes, I think that Molly is like, oh God, not this now. Like, Sirius is the one who's. I think we're right in thinking he's having a bit of fun when he at least brings it up. Like, so Harry, you haven't asked about what's up with Voldemort. I'm sure Molly's thinking anything but that right now. Like, let's get these people to bed. And so I think that knocks her sort of off her edge, and she's more likely to blow a gasket or say something offensive.
I wonder too if she has, in the time that they've all been cooped up together, noticed that Sirius is a little bit stunted of growth as a result of the fact that he's been incarcerated for so long. And that's of no fault of his own. But I just kind of wonder if part of the reason why she seems hesitant to trust his judgment is because she sees how prone he is to being rash or doing things that are potentially dangerous. And so she doesn't want that to rub off on Harry, and for Harry to go and do something stupid. And we all know Harry is also prone to being rash and playing the hero and jumping the gun. It's a very Gryffindor trait. And he has that in spades. So
it's just shocking to see, I guess, so little respect for Harry's legal guardian.
No, I agree with that.
And that's the interesting thing is, Molly has made her mind up about Sirius possibly long ago. Maybe there's still remnants of thinking that he was, a criminal.
Wasn't there when Dumbledore said that when he told Sirius to reveal himself to the Weasleys, wasn't she right, a little bit dubious? So I maybe you're right. Maybe part of that prejudice is also not completely rubbed off.
Well, she just doesn't know Sirius enough to say he's not James. That is such a, and I know the movies are partially at fault for this whole thing too. But ultimately I think it's way out of line for her. If she is having her feelings, which she is, that she needs to be the one to speak for Harry. She is stepping on the toes of Sirius. She is not listening to Lupin and some of these other people that may have different rational arguments. Yeah. And she goes straight for the jugular.
Specifically is so rational that it is surprising. You're right that she doesn't concede, at least to somebody like him. Because he's so calm and collected.
Yeah.
Thing I did want to bring up and just wanted to note, and certainly not something I don't think I would have picked up on the last time we were reading this chapter or the time before that, but and Pam, I definitely want your thoughts on this, is that aside from Tonks, Molly's the only adult woman that's present, and she's clearly the only vocal adult woman. And I got a sense of, or a vibe of her opinion, her voice being drowned out by all the men in the room. You have Arthur, you have Lupin, you have Sirius. Is there anything to that? I'm thinking back to the episodes you did when we were talking about women in Harry Potter, and maybe the author is trying to make a point here.
It's interesting you say that, because I think that like perhaps there is something to that, but also I think at the detriment to Molly, she's also written really shrilly and very like stereotypically like a mother hen. And so when women are often described as being hysterical or too emotional, the idea behind that is that they're not in their right mind to be making decisions. And so I think that like inadvertently, as a result of her being an emotional character, she actually ends up falling prey to some of these stereotypes of women that are not always accurate, because you can be emotional but also be making a good point.
Yeah.
And I think like at the end of the day, like she really like truly in her heart believes that she's trying to make the right decision for Harry, but because she's so emotional, because she's leading by like smothering everybody else and trying to tell everybody else what to do, you cannot like separate that almost from like the way that she's trying to mother the entire group of adults that are present.
She's also guilty of not being able to see Harry for the person that he is, I think, which is funnily enough, this is exactly what she accuses Sirius of. But I think that all she sees when she looks at Harry is a young child. Like, she, he's 15, but she forgets that even 3 years ago, he saved her daughter's life alone. And
she probably doesn't want to think about like how much he's had to go through
the trauma
at such a young age, right? Not only losing his parents, but like even the events of the last year, watching Cedric die, watching Voldemort come back, fighting Voldemort. That's so much to go through.
Right, but these are his credentials. These are literally what everyone else is using to be like, he needs to know.
Yeah. But I think like her way is compartmentalizing that. It's like, okay, that happened. That does not mean we have to put him in a position for that to happen again. Right. And I almost kind of feel like that's why Dumbledore is operating the way that he is. And I think he says that later. He's like, I was just trying to protect you. I wanted you to stay a child for a little bit longer, which is like a whole other thing, because like you also can't be so obtuse about what's actually happening in the real world, Yeah. So it just
Harry
doesn't
hasn't
make
been
sense.
innocent. He's been abused all these years, to your point. But so my argument is that Molly can't see Harry for Harry the way that she sees that when Sirius, looks at Harry, she sees James. She also just sees a child. There's no sort of half step here that she takes for telling Harry pretty much anything. The only reason he finds out anything is because of the others that go to bat for him. So
the whole comparison to James, it makes me wonder how well Molly actually knew James
or Sirius.
Well, yes, to make that kind of a comment, you need to have some kind of connection to the person that you're referencing here, and that's why it falls flat for me. The other piece, which comes up during this conversation, which was totally out of line, was her blaming him for being in Azkaban.
I know, yeah, not his fault.
You haven't exactly been there for Harry, have you?
She's grasping for straws.
She's lost her cool.
Yeah. And one more point about how Molly gets depicted in the series and in this chapter in particular. Pam, you described her as being shrill and controlling, loud. Our first introduction and Harry's first introduction to a howler is from Mrs. Weasley, which I think also says a lot about how Rowling was trying to depict Molly across this series. She's the one sending off the howler and screaming at Harry in front of everybody. And
she's
Ron.
Very Dumbledore-esque, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, even like, I guess if we're going by like even movieisms, like the whole like, where have you been? That's also very like, I feel like that is Molly in a nutshell for so many people, even if she is more than that.
Yeah. So Arthur Weasley, we're getting on to some of these peripheral adults who are here. Arthur Weasley does, I think, the coolest thing he could have done. I want to see this depicted somewhere where in the middle of it all, Molly asks Arthur for support and he takes his glasses off and just starts to like wipe them down and he's not responding.
He's exhausted.
Everyone else just has to wait. And then he puts them back on.
Just trying to figure out how he's gonna what his next move's gonna be. He's like, how do I get out of this without having to sleep on the couch later?
You can always do that. Listeners at home, honestly, if you ever need just an extra second to think, take your glasses off and make a show of wiping them down. You'll get
an extra my invisible glasses in
10 seconds. Oh, Pam, join the club.
Going back to the conversation earlier, could you look at this as another stereotypical moment of the wife having to defer to the husband to have to support, because his voice has impact, his voice has influence. She can't stand on her own in this moment.
I think in any partnership, it's a great check and balance to have your partner be able to be there. And I don't think Arthur's a bad husband. I don't think he's a bad partner. I think normally he would be there to step in and say, your mother's right, boys, get upstairs. That's his normal track. The fact that he doesn't do that and actually does not side with Molly should show her that she's gone too far, that she's too out of, the opinion of it. After Arthur says his thing, she's like, well, I'm going to be outvoted. But yeah, props to Arthur. And I think the interesting thing for me here is that what Molly is specifically arguing against in these moments is giving Harry a blank check to ask any questions he might have. She's not saying, don't tell him this one thing. She's saying, don't let him ask questions. And this specific kind of nuance here really rubs me the wrong way, because not being able to at least ask a question seems a little, I don't know, authoritarian. Because
she's trying to protect
not letting him ask the question.
But this gets back to
we could just say we can't know that. Next question.
Like what Dumbledore said at the end of book 1, alas, the first question you asked me, I cannot tell you. But at least entertain the forum for Harry to ask some things, anything that comes to mind.
This gets back to a point I raised a few minutes ago. Why didn't they prepare better in advance? Yeah, things are hectic and busy. Why not say, hey, Harry's coming tomorrow. Why don't we say X, Y, and Z to him?
Yeah.
And, come with some opening remarks. And then if Harry wants to ask any other questions, he can. But they had to have known he would want to ask questions. Of course he's going to.
It's a great point. And, if you're at war, which these people are, and you cross into a new territory and meet up with your fellow soldiers, you get briefed. You get briefed on the situation. And where's Harry's brief? Essentially, he needs that. And that's what Sirius is fighting to give him. Lupin argues that if Harry is going to get facts, he should get them from them. I agree with that. You can't trust a game of telephone to get you all the info you need. And pretty much the only thing I can say for Molly is, she is actually right that Dumbledore does not want Harry to know certain things, but he did not specify. And here's another example of how Dumbledore, not confiding in his closest allies about something relating to Harry, ultimately is dangerous for everybody. Because if he had just said, here's where the line is, especially now that he's coming, here's where the line is, his allies, these adults, would have been a lot more prepared to handle the Harry situation, and therefore the rest of the children that are living at Grimmauld Place. So,
quick question for everybody. Maybe not so quick. Whose side would James and Lily be on here?
I love this.
I mean, this is a big question, I think. But I think one reason this chapter is so interesting is because you can see the perspective of both sides. Mm-hmm. I want to say, well, first, I think James has to be on. Maybe the answer is James is on Sirius' side and Lily is on Molly's side.
Oh my God.
No, I think Lily would trust James. Sorry. He's not James, Sirius. I think Lily would trust Harry to know a bunch of information about what's going on.
This is assuming like they lived, but Voldemort is still trying to kill Harry, right?
Right.
Because I need some parameters here.
Well, if Lily and James are also equally in the dark about why Dumbledore doesn't want to tell him everything, they would probably.
No, I think that they would have had to know. I assume that if they were to be alive, they would know everything. Yeah, I think that like for different. I agree. I think that James would probably be on the side of telling Harry more, and I think Lily would probably say like, "Listen, like we were too young when we entered this war, and I don't want that for our kid." But like they'd probably come to some happy medium that ends up being like what he's told.
It's an interesting question about which of his parents would side with who in this room, because this argument exists as a result of Harry not having parents. So these people are like trying to play at being Harry's parents. But the other aspect is if Gillian Lames were alive, they would be saying, we'll just protect Harry. Like, we don't need to tell him everything. We'll just keep him safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think that like they would also know like what parts of themselves their son inherited. And I think that like the idea of Harry being rash, like Sirius, like James was, like what we know of James, I think that they would have known that like they would have had to tell him something in an effort to get him to cool his jets a bit while he's over at Hogwarts, because they can't protect him there.
Yeah.
Right. Mike, any thoughts?
It is a good question because it's so hard to answer. Like Pam was saying, you need some parameters around it, because if I'm imagining James and Lily just kind of hovering over the kitchen in the smoke that's coming from Mundungus's pipe, observing all that's going on, I do think that Lily would in part side with Molly from a protective standpoint, but I also think she would want to make sure that her son was armed with the most information possible. So I could see her also leading in the direction of Sirius. It's also hard because we don't really know them as characters.
Yeah, but knowing that brave, fighting the greater good, Gryffindors.
Yeah, like I think of them as Aurors, although that's probably not true. It's just the fact that they thrice-defied Voldemort. Like, they've gone toe-to-toe with Voldemort as much as possible. The topic of what Voldemort is up to and what he's doing would have been extremely important for James and Lily to know at all times. And therefore, if they were somehow still alive and still on the run from Voldemort, you better bet your butt that they would tell Harry everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what makes me think that they wouldn't necessarily disagree with Molly's intentions, but I think they would ultimately side with Harry getting more information.
Well, I don't disagree with Molly's intentions either. But yeah, the methods is just wild. So we have more to come after a word from our sponsors.
We also wanted to look at the uphill struggle against willful ignorance in the wizarding world right now. And Sirius tells Harry that it was great that they had so quickly a heads up when Voldemort returned, and it gave the Order an advantage. We got to give props to Dumbledore here.
Ugh.
Sirius said it was only because Harry went to Dumbledore and then Dumbledore got the band back together so quick that they were able to start moving on fighting back against Voldemort. So give Dumbledore some props, okay?
It's funny because Harry's like, so what did that do? And it's true that he has not yet seen a direct result. Like, he hasn't himself witnessed. Harry has not witnessed the benefits of his own actions telling Dumbledore. He's like, yeah, you got a headquarters, but you're not telling me any information. So how do I know you even have any information to give? Is kind of a fun angle. But yeah, it's the Order's in a bad spot. Sirius talks about how he himself is still a wanted man. He's not able to go out. They can't hand out leaflets. They can't. The position that the Ministry has taken means they can't openly recruit for the Order of the Phoenix. Like, this is the struggle against ignorance. It's literally like the whole world doesn't know and isn't being told by the powers that be that Voldemort is back. And that is such a disadvantage to everyone who's not already in the Order.
Doesn't Little Hangleton have CCTV? Is that not
probably
something that Dumbledore could bring his evidence to Fudge and say, hey, check out this, event in the graveyard that happened.
If anywhere in Little Angleton had CCTV, it's Graveyard, because,
See?
they're very secure.
I don't think there's security cameras in graveyards. That seems
there
like
is,
an invasion.
because they have to deter grave robbers.
Maybe. I don't know. I have a hard time picturing that.
Okay. Yeah, it's an aside. We'll do some research later. But there's a time to credit Dumbledore a little later. But here, let's talk about Fudge. He's keeping the public in the dark. Lupin says that being unaware makes the public much easier targets for Death Eaters. Also, especially on the point of the Imperious Curse. This is something that I find very interesting, because the Death Eaters, we know, are not afraid to use the unforgivable curses. But with Imperios specifically, you're so much more susceptible if you're not even aware that somebody's going to come at you and just cast it. So there's an example of how Fudge's actions and his fears and everything he's doing just make people victims. Like, people are so innocent and so susceptible because of this choice that their minister has made.
And all in part because of Fudge's ego. He hates that Dumbledore, he thinks, wanted his position as top dog at the ministry. I love the politics of all this too, as we learn in this chapter.
Yeah, it's well developed. Like, you could hate the situation, but be like, this is really interesting. Fudge is also leaning on the Daily Prophet. He's suppressing whatever stories there would be. He's raising politically motivated discourse. He's encouraging everybody to discredit Harry and Dumbledore, which is what Hermione was saying in the previous chapter. And so even if they do hear what a member of the Order of the Phoenix were to tell them, Voldemort's back, they're less inclined to believe it. And this is the part where Fudge crosses over, in my mind, from unconscionable to completely insanely unforgivable, because that's really the issue. If you have really allowed for skepticism on this part, like, you are so much worse than somebody who's just ignorant, because you're causing so much. There's so much, they're going to have to work so much harder to get anyone to believe them. The truth, by the way.
Right. And this is something that would have been interesting to see too post book 7. Like, how does a new Ministry of Magic regain the trust of its citizens when it's been broken so far? And not to mention the Daily Prophet, totally in the gutter in terms of its reputation.
And news, is there any fantasy series with good news media? Like, honestly, I need to escape into a book about good journalism.
And I like the fact that you frame this as an uphill battle. It's like, it really paints the picture, the conversation that happens here, just how much the Order is up against.
Yeah.
It's not just Voldemort. It's Fudge and the Ministry. It's the Daily Prophet. And it's meant to convey to the reader that, look, like, this is the adult side of what's happening now in the wizarding world, because for so long we were just so focused on what was going on at Hogwarts with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Now it's, we often talk about how the world opens up as these books go on, and this is another example of that.
Well, that's a great point, because again, like you're saying, like, this might be the first time we really get a sense of what it's like to be an adult in the wizarding world. Like, when all that stuff with the Chamber of Secrets was happening, and they were like, oh yeah, the Board of Governors wants to close Hogwarts. You're like, oh, that must be what it's like to be an adult in the wizarding world and be a school administrator. But everybody else that's an adult is having to go to work, worry about their own safety, worrying about their family, worrying about their reputation, having to sneak around, provide misinformation so that their allies can succeed. Like, being an adult right now sucks harder than being a Hogwarts student. And that's saying something.
Yep.
So it also really draws to light how much the Order of the members are all kind of misfits. I mentioned earlier, but Sirius is a wanted man. He can't leave his house. Lupin has a funny line about not being invited to dinner places because of his werewolf status.
It's not funny. That's sad, Eric.
Somebody get this man an invite to your dinner party. The raw steak will be delicious. And, unfortunately, like, I think what they're doing is apologizing in advance for, like, why they haven't made more gains. Like, Harry's like, what do you have to show me? Honestly, not much.
Yeah. But here's another +1 for Dumbledore, because it's noted here that Dumbledore's the only one who's been pounding the alarm and sticking his head out about Voldemort being back. No other Order member is able to do this.
No other Order members in a position to do that.
I was going to say, it's because it's him, isn't it? It's him. It's always him.
Sure, but you still got to credit Big D. Dumbledore is the only one who's able and willing. You know, he doesn't have to stick his head out. He could get thrown in prison. It's said that is stated in this chapter. He can't push it too much because he could get thrown into Azkaban, and then Voldemort would have an easier time rising.
Yeah. And I love that line Charlie has where he says, like, Dumbledore doesn't care as long as he gets to stay on the chocolate frog cards.
That's great.
Like, that's so good.
And Dumbledore allegedly
he does care,
told him that
he wants
too.
to make sure he's around. Yeah. But it's like, that's such a great way to like diffuse the worry that I'm sure a lot of them have about him being demoted or losing some of these big accolades they're all being stripped to discredit him, to your point. So
it's
honestly, so Dumbledore.
It is.
It's pretty badass. Like, the reason we're not having a Where's Dumbledore segment this week is because he just stuck his neck out bigly for the Wizengamot. And you can imagine that statement, like, would have just been amazing to witness. Dumbledore coming out to his fellow Wizengamot members and being like, I have an announcement, Voldemort is back. And then just being like, trying to shut him down and him keep going and like, just get the information out.
Yeah. The hard part right now is there's not a whole lot of evidence for Dumbledore to present. It's really just his word. I mean, what else are you going to put in front of the Wizengamot or Fudge to prove otherwise?
Harry, James Potter.
Yeah, not going to really do too much there, in my opinion.
Give him some Veritaserum and call it a day.
Yes, exactly.
So Molly, ultimately, the only control she was able to exert in the end was putting Ginny to bed, which is a darn shame. But she comes back just as they're mentioning the prophecy and says, well, that's enough. You've told him far enough already. And I guess that's where we have to leave things for this chapter. So that was exciting. But we do have a number of odds and ends to get into.
There was an Evanesco appearance in this chapter from Bill. It's when he has some papers out, some scrolls, and Mrs. Weasley doesn't want the kids to see them, so he Evanescos them away. And the reason I bring this up is because they just get moved somewhere else. They're not disintegrated and thrown into a fire, never to be seen again. And yet, we all can never forget that day when Pottermore or Wizarding World on Twitter said, hey, by the way, everybody, I know nobody was asking, but Evanesco is great for when a student pees on the floor and it needs to be cleaned up. I'm paraphrasing. But yep. I was like, wait, how Evanesco is used in this chapter is not how it's been described on social media by official Wizarding World accounts.
It's not all it can do.
It's a very versatile spell.
I think what it was before Hogwarts had indoor plumbing, because that was only invented at a certain, year. And it's like, before that, the wizards just used the vanishing spell. It's like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, Andrew, as always, for keeping right on top of any reference to...
I keep an eye on the number 7, the number 12, and Evanesco. Those are my 3 lanes.
Very important.
Mm-hmm.
2 things that caught my eye. One was just a warm-hearted moment. Crookshanks balling up on Sirius's lap, and I just thought, they've been buddies since Prisoner of Azkaban. Because I was thinking to myself, well, wait, why is Crookshanks being so nice to Sirius? And then I remembered back their communication in book 3. And then we have a foreshadow alert. When Fred and George are using magic to try and help Molly out with dinner, they end up dropping a knife, and the knife drops right where Sirius's right hand was previously.
Ooh.
Now, can I ask a question on this, though? If Molly hadn't yelled at them, do we think everything would have flown all over the place?
That
they got it under
wasn't
control.
Helpful.
Yeah, they got it under control. No, because like the cauldron, yes, it sloshes a little bit, but it stops at the end of the table. They're good.
Poor Sirius.
I want to throw out another foreshadow alert, too. Dung actually asks Sirius about a 15th century solid silver goblet. And to me, this is foreshadowing Dung ransacking the place after Sirius Black dies.
Yep,
Curious about what he's got on hand there.
Also, we're always looking for evidence of the Horcrux inside Harry that negatively affects his mood. And I found what I think is my favorite one that we've ever covered before, which is when Ron and Hermione are arguing to be included. Ron says, Harry will tell me, and Hermione, everything you say anyway. Won't you? He added uncertainly. And then it says, douche Harry's about to come out. It says, for a split second, Harry considered telling Ron that he wouldn't tell him a single word, that he could try a taste of being kept in the dark and see how he liked it. But the nasty impulse vanished as they looked at each other. And then he says, course I will. And Ron and Hermione both beamed. I think they're relieved. So this moment of Harry's instinct, his mood is rotten. He's still pissed at them. And he's inclined to actually tell Ron, no, I'm not telling you anything. But then he looks at his friends. And what's happening is the same thing that happened with the Dementors earlier in this book. He's overcome with love. Even in the most dire circumstances, it bursts out of him. He can cast a whole Patronus. It drives out this influence from Voldemort. And, we know that when Voldemort tries to take possession of Harry at the end of this book, it's that love that drives Voldemort out. So the closeness, the quickness with which Harry looks at Ron and all of a sudden this nasty crap evaporates and he tells Ron, of course, I'll tell you everything. Wow. I think that's an example of the Horcrux's influence on Harry.
The weapon we have is love, to quote the Wizard Rock song by, who was that? Harry and the Potters.
Harry and the Potters. So before we wrap the chapter, we have a Links Line question this week, which is, I'm very fond of these answers. And we asked the question, so the Order of the Phoenix is made up of teachers, parents, criminals, Aurors, and more. But when we think about the group and our favorite members, what characters stick out from the Potter series that haven't joined the Order, at least as of where we're reading now in Book 5? And how would the series be different if they had joined the Order? So, what characters aren't in the Order but should be? And we heard from Leia Jameson, who says, Ferenz. It's always a good idea to include different perspectives, and having more non-human beings like centaurs would bring a certain wisdom to the group's decisions. Plus, he's been othered from the herd at Hogwarts, so he might need somewhere to go.
Brienne said Professor Flitwick. I feel like he is such an underappreciated character who is pretty badass with charms. And a few other listeners said Flitwick as well. For example, Barry said former dueling champion is exactly who you need. Also, Ollivander would be a great resource, even if he feels a little chaotic, neutral as a member.
Mm-hmm. Monet said Oliver Wood. They need some new grad/young blood on the team. He's strategic, nimble, and athletic. Plus, since he's playing professional Quidditch, he can make oh-so-important alliances cross-country and internationally and travel without suspicion.
Oh, I like that last part. Travel without suspicion.
Mev said Neville's grandmother. She is badass.
Oh, yeah. That's such a good one.
Do you think she would agree, though? Because I don't know. I kind of go back and forth.
I want no part of this. Let me stay at home. I'm too old for this. For Dumbledore's latest antics.
My son and his wife are, at the St. Mungo's.
Oh my God.
I've had enough.
I think, you've solved it, Pam, why Dumbledore hasn't invited her.
She's been through too much.
I bet she would have words with Dumbledore if he was like, do you want to join my order? And she's like, your cause.
I'll show up for the final battle, but not a second before.
Oh, man.
Well, how about this lady? Rachel said, as awesome as it would be for the owners of Honeydukes to drop in with snacks, my answer is Madam Hooch. Seriously, what happened to her? She always seems so shrewd. She'd be a good addition.
Jennifer says, I think for the purposes of camaraderie through the wizarding world, we should include the goblins. They have control of Gringotts Bank. They know all its secrets. Bring the goblins and humans together to help fight Voldemort. I gotta say, this is reminding me, between friends, goblins, all these other suggestions, that for somebody who preaches international magical cooperation and read that to be multi-species cooperation, Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix is not very diverse in species.
No. I really like this one from Kuroe Chloe. Ernie from the Night Bus. I feel like Dumbledore would find value in a bus driver who sees and hears all kinds of things while out on his route. Just like how Mundungus Fletcher is a good ally in the underground scenes. Plus, free transportation for Order members. That's a really funny one.
From Steph, Wilkie Twycross, the apparition instructor who works at the Department of Magical Transportation. Imagine how much easier Harry's trip from Privet Drive to the Burrow would have been with an insider on board. And he's such a wet blanket that no one would suspect him to be part of the Order, so he'd fly under the radar both literally and figuratively.
Thank you, patrons, for submitting those answers. We are really liking this new segment that we have over on our Patreon. Stay tuned for more questions and answers in the weeks and months ahead. And now it's time for MVP of the week. And this week's theme, Eric,
is most outrageous over-the-top thing that Molly Weasley does in this chapter.
I'm going to give it to when she says, he's not James, Sirius. That was a low blow.
Yeah, Sirius didn't say he was. Hello. Okay, I think it's still the interrupting Dung's apology because, darn it, I would have wanted to hear or read that. So, just to tell him off for smoking. Come on.
I am actually going to let Pam go first here because I am going to +1 what she says.
Oh, okay.
Good strategy, Micah.
Mine is throwing Sirius's wrongful incarceration right back in his face because that was ridiculous.
Yep. That was probably the worst thing she said to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things, but yeah, I'll agree.
Listeners, if you have feedback about today's discussion, you can contact us by emailing or sending a voice memo recorded on your phone to mugglecast@gmail.com. We also have the contact form on mugglecast.com, and I think we're going to have a Muggle Mail episode in the next couple of weeks.
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks' time. Next week, as we approach Halloween, we're going to have a special episode for everybody that we are calling the Wizarding World Graveyard. But we're not looking at canon. We're going to look at the various parts of the Harry Potter franchise that have been buried by Warner Brothers and Rowling over the years. Things like Pottermore, Wizards Unite. I'm actually wearing a Wizards Unite t-shirt right now. And actually, I don't know if you three saw, but just the other day, they put something else in the graveyard. But I'm going to leave it right there as a teaser for next week.
Oh, no.
You're just gonna have to find out. You're just gonna have to peek into next week's doc.
Fair enough.
We've got a good list already going in that doc, which is also another Patreon benefit. You get access to our planning docs. So now it is time for everybody's favorite game show, one that will never be buried, Quizzitch.
Last week's question was, in honor of the portrait of Walburga Black, what famous artist and sculptor was given an exclusive license to use a material known as blackest black? This really happened. You can Google it. The correct answer was Anish Kapoor. And 32% of people said they didn't look this up. He is definitely a name in the art world. So last week's winners were as follows. A Ravenclaw in Maryland, Andrew's Elbow. Oh, that was nice of your elbow, Andrew, to submit a Quizzitch answer.
Okay.
Crookshanks's squashed and fried eggy face after Ron hit it with the frying pan he was using to make breakfast. Distant relative Vanta Black. That's actually an Anish Kapoor reference. Very clever. Elizabeth K. I am studying art in college, and we talked about the feud over it today, so I was very happy when I heard the quizzes question. Wow, what are the odds of that? Jim Dale is my husband. Low back, slow, black, crow, black, fishing boat, bobbing sea. I don't know what that's a reference to. Me checking Temu's new arrivals every day for Laura's pants. Patronus Seeker, Puff Down Under, Sirius in Tibet, Max that. And the one that Neville left in his back pocket that made his bottom so long. And here is next week's question. Since there was a lot of talk in this chapter about being of age, please, Quizzitch entrants, Name a nation within the United Kingdom where the legal voting age is 16 years. That's kind of early, kind of young to be voting.
I thought that you were doing this in celebration of the upcoming election day here in the United States.
I don't want to think about the election day. Yeah.
Register to vote.
Nope, not thinking about it.
And to go out and vote.
Yeah, you should register.
IWillVote.com, my favorite website.
In the United States, you have to be 18 years of age to vote, but what nations can you be 16 within the United Kingdom? That's a good reference, Micah. It's definitely worthwhile. Everybody check your voter registration status and submit your Quizzitch answers to us on the Quizzitch form, MuggleCast.com/Quizzitch, or click on Quizzitch from the main nav. If you're already on our website, looking at transcripts, checking out must listens, or any other thing that you would do.
And this show is brought to you by Muggles like you. We are an independent podcast, and because of that, your financial support is very important. In fact, it's the only reason we've been able to podcast for 19 years and counting. We got 3 great ways you can help us out. If you're an Apple Podcast user, subscribe to MuggleCast Gold. You get ad-free and early access to MuggleCast plus 2 bonus MuggleCast installments every month. We're going to be recording a brand new one after today's episode. For even more benefits, hit up patreon.com/MuggleCast. You get the links line, the live streams, a personal video message from one of the 4 of us, and a whole lot more. Also, number 3 best way to support us. Visit MuggleCastMerch.com for all your brand new merchandise. Don't go to Temu for Laura's pants. Come to MuggleCastMerch.com for Laura's pants. I don't even think Pam gets this reference, and she's probably very concerned about what we're talking about.
Don't worry,
now.
Pam. It's
yeah. What are you guys doing with Laura's pants?
We're gonna
sending them back
in
to
mass.
them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry, she's cool with this. It's a
all right,
old
all
joke.
Right, got it.
If you enjoy MuggleCast and think other Muggles would too, tell a friend about the show, and we would love a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app. Pam, thanks again for joining us on today's episode. We'll catch you on What the Hype and Millennial every week too. Well, thanks everybody for listening once again. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
I'm Micah.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.